Hi, you're listening to the Thrift Studying Podcast, where we learn how to make the most of what we have so we can live simply, frugally, and to the glory of God. This is your host, Heather of Garnet Creek Farm, and today we are going to talk about chickens on the homestead. Are they cost effective? How do we begin feeding chickens? Should we do free range or use grain? Which is the better method? But first, I'd like to introduce you to today's sponsor, SchoolhouseTeachers.com. Homeschooling this year? Don't miss the SchoolhouseTeachers.com summer sale. It ends September 2nd. Right now, you can get 2 full years for only $269. That's buy one, get one free. Or go all in with a lifetime membership for only $990. That's one payment, access forever for the entire family. That's over 400 Christian courses, pre-K through 12th grade, no extra books, no hidden fees. If you're ready to simplify your homeschool and save big, then tap the link in the description, but hurry. This deal ends soon. Also, before I get into today's topic, I have a few updates from Garnet Creek Farm. The first is we have been working with Dexters the past couple of years. My husband did his research. He realized how beneficial they are when you have a smaller homestead. We have about 13 acres that we use on our property and then an additional 10 that we borrow from a friend. So we usually split up our cows between the two properties, but the 13 acres are primarily wooded area. So the best option for our property has been Dexter's because not only can they go into part of the woods, but we only need to use a small pasture area in order for them to be exactly what we need on our property. So we've been breeding and raising and having different Dexters. And this week, we were able to trade one of our bull calves for a slightly larger bull that we are going to be able to use to breed with our Jersey. And then we are going to butcher that new bull so we can have meat. So we're learning which animals are best for breeding, which are best for milking, which are best for butchering and having in the freezer. We're figuring out the types of cattle that we should use in order to feed our family of 7. And the Dexter that we recently traded has shown us that this is going to be an excellent choice on our homestead. Another announcement is we finally have had our first, after many years, broody hen. I don't know why it took so long to finally have a hen that would successfully sit on her eggs and hatch one. But one day my son went out to the chicken coop. He wanted to make sure there was enough water and grain. And one of the eggs that one of our hens happened to be sitting on hatched. And he heard the little chirp, he heard the little cheep, and surprisingly, even though it's been about a week or so, it has still survived. No predators have attacked it. The mom is doing a great job taking care of it. And even though she was sitting on about a dozen eggs and only one hatched, I am still counting that as a win because it has been extremely rare for any of our hens to actually sit on her eggs. And even if they wanted to, my kids would always be so quick to bring the eggs into the kitchen without even giving them a chance. So it's been exciting. The kids are excited. And it's been another topic, a conversation that I want to bring up later about whether it's best to allow nature to take its course or to use an incubator or to buy chicks. And we're going to talk about that later. But another announcement is that after many, many years, we have a resurgence of blacksmithing items in our Etsy store, which I will link below. They have recently been revived in our store. We've had the store several years. My husband used to blacksmith on a regular basis. Not necessarily, he wasn't a farrier showing horses, but more decorative items. And something happened recently where we were able to go to an event. My husband, my son, my daughter, they were all able to do blacksmithing demonstrations and sell some items. And so we are going to start bringing that back onto the homestead, which is really exciting. So I'll leave a link to the leaf pendant that my husband is selling in the store right now. It's been popular in the past. It did well at that event I was just talking about. And I'm also giving one away on my blog. So if you head over there, you can enter the giveaway that's going on there. And now to talk about chickens. The first point I want to talk about is, are they cost effective? I get this question asked all of the time. Looking at the cost of grain, housing, the upkeep, the question I almost always get from skeptics, from people curious, wanting to start but not sure, usually people who are living in suburban areas that technically can have chickens, maybe not a rooster, but they can have hens solely for the purpose of eggs, and not fully into homesteading but wanting to test the waters. They ask, and of course I asked in the beginning too, is it cheaper than just buying eggs from the store? And the short answer is a resounding no. It is not cheaper dollar signs wise, but it all depends on what you are hoping to gain from having chickens, looking at the big picture. If we're looking just for a cheap source of eggs, then no, it is not the cheapest way to go. It is not the most inexpensive way to go. But if you're thinking long-term health benefits, potentially less doctor bills in the future because you are able to see and know where your food comes from. You're able to do your research. You're able to monitor how your chickens are being treated, what they're eating, where they're grazing. Are they being given antibiotics? All of these play a huge role in our health, the ones that are consuming the eggs. And right now I'm only talking about egg, not necessarily raising meat birds. We're talking about eggs right now. And when we know where the food comes from and we're determined to live a more clean eating lifestyle, then yes, I do believe in the long run it is cost effective. But no, upfront, no, it's not. And if you've ever had a farm fresh egg, and most of you listening to this probably have, whether you get it from a farmer's market, whether you raise chickens yourself, whether you did when you were growing up, you see the nutrients. You see the difference between an egg you buy at the store and the egg you get from your backyard. It's richer, it's darker, you see the nutrients, you see the benefits even as you're preparing the food. Another benefit to having chickens, even if it's not necessarily cheaper, is it's a homeschooling lesson. If you have kids, you're teaching them hard work. You're teaching them self-sufficiency, and that in itself is pure gold. You're teaching them farm to table, where their food comes from. When we were at an event recently, there was this huge trailer from our state's Department of Agriculture. And of course, I wanted to take my elementary age students in and see what it's all about. But quickly I realized it pretty much had nothing to do with anything I believed in or wanted the kids to learn about. Everything was about agriculture in our state, about farming in our state. Everything was about spraying with chemicals and everything essentially that we are trying to get away from when it comes to homesteading. And I have to remember in my mind that farming and homesteading essentially are two different things. Of course, you can have positive farming practices such as Polyface Farm with Joel Salatin. There are definitely people who are having ethical practices on their farms. But when I walked in there and I saw that it was nothing that I wanted my kids to even know about, we quickly left. And I realized that what they're learning on our homestead is much more beneficial. And basically, it was like I was walking into a public school classroom, which is fine if you are teaching your kids in the public school system. But for us, when it comes to farming methods, we just are taking a different approach. And that was not the approach that we wanted to take. So the second question that I have is how to begin. And many joke about the age-old question of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Of course, in my mind, I would say the chicken because of the account of creation in Genesis. God created animals and then they reproduced. I'm sure that there are many scholars that have gone into maybe how that could have actually been an egg. I haven't done research necessarily on that, but just from my knowledge and my understanding, I would say the chicken. But on the homestead, what would be the most cost effective way? What would be the most beneficial way? Should we buy eggs and incubate them? Should we buy chicks from the farmer down the road or the store that has chicks in the springtime? Do we buy pullets? Do we go ahead and buy full-size chickens? And we have done all of the above. And as of last week, we've even now have had the full cycle where one of our chickens has actually sat on her egg and produced another chicken for us to have, which is exciting. And I personally cannot say which I think is better. I have more fun with the incubation process. I love having fertilized eggs, putting them in the incubator. Of course, we have an incubator that turns itself, so it's less work than some of the other incubators that you could have where you have to turn the eggs twice a day. But if you have an incubator that turns itself, it can be so rewarding. It is rewarding. I find it rewarding to put those fertilized eggs in there and just trust the process. And then you see these precious little chicks hatch. Now, there have been times where the temperature hasn't been right, the moisture level hasn't been right, and not all the chicks that we put in there hatched. And like any animal that you have on the homestead, it's devastating when they don't all survive, they don't all make it. When there's death on the homestead, it's heartbreaking. And that was hard for me the first year that I did the incubation. But as you learn, as you grow in your understanding and knowledge of how far apart to keep them and how to properly use the incubator, it is a wonderful experience. That said, keep in mind that you are going to have to pay for extra grain because most likely, regardless of what time of year you have them hatch, which you ideally want it to be in the spring, they're not going to be ready to go outside yet. Not only for predators, but just the weather. They, depending on what zone you're in or where you live, a lot of times you're going to want to keep them in your house under heat lamps. We would usually, the first time we did it, of course, we did it in our living room because we thought it was so exciting. Then we started moving them into the basement because of the smell. Now we have a special section in our greenhouse, which we had to build and create a top grate on top of the brooding area because, or on top of the area that we had the baby chicks, because the cats were getting in there. And so you just have to look at your homestead, your situation, what you have going on, because there's going to be predators wherever you go. And even if you have young children, it's important to teach them to only handle them when you're there and make sure that you're watching them and showing them not to squeeze them, because you watch the cartoons and the little kids, oh, I want to hold you and squeeze you so tight and you're so cute. And you, that's not reality. It's like a newborn baby. You have to be very careful with these chicks, and unfortunately they can die. Uh, and it's common for that to happen when young children unintentionally are a little too rough with the baby chicks. So I recommend starting them using an incubator, especially in the homeschool setting, because your children are able to see the process. That said, oftentimes around this time of year, we're in August at the time of this recording, and slightly maybe before, you might have several people on different platforms, social media platforms, that they're done. They want to get rid of their full-size chickens. And we actually just received one from another homesteader just a few days ago, and that happens often, almost every year. If you have chickens, if you are somebody that raises chickens and somebody wants to get rid of it, then you're the go-to person. And a lot of times that's how we'll get our chickens. They might be older, so they might need to be used in different ways. They might not be laying anymore, or they might be. It completely depends. And so, since this is a thrift setting blog, and we're talking about doing things cost effectively and efficiently, I'm all about bartering. I'm all about trading. And of course, I'm all about taking things that are free. So if someone's going to give me a free chicken, yes, I will take that. And I am happy to take them at any stage and any age. So the last thing I wanted to talk about has to do with chicken feed and which is best for your chickens. Should you go free range or use grain? And of course, if we're in the homesteading world, of course, in our minds, we're going to say, yes, free range. That's the healthiest. That's the best way. We don't want them cooped up like those commercial facilities, which I 100% agree with. But after several years, the first year when we got started, we'd be driving down the road. We live in a rural area, and we would see different neighbors. They would have their chickens free ranging in their front yard, and you would wonder, wow, how are they not getting hit by cars? They're going right up to the edge of the road, and they're just always right there. How is that even possible? But we tried it. We saw other people doing it, and we did it, and we lost several chickens that way, and many chickens would go into other yards that they were not welcome in. And it just did not seem to make sense for us. Even with our fencing, they would continually find other ways to get around the fencing. And so that just didn't seem to be the best fit for us to just have them roaming in our backyard. So the best option for us was, and still is, a chicken tractor. Now, we do have a run where we have a coop where we can open the door and then they can go into a run. And that's what we'll do in the beginning when they're smaller, with chicken wire around the bottom. And they do great because all the fresh grass and everything will be growing. And then after a few weeks or possibly months, they have just completely destroyed and taking advantage of that area, and they're just going to need something else. So we do have a chicken tractor that will move around daily, and they will be able to eat the grass, the bugs, whatever in our backyard, but they are still confined. So predators can't get them, dogs can't get them, cats can't get them, or they can't get out of where we want them to be. So we still give them grain, especially our laying hens. Traditionally, on our property, we have kept the laying hens closer to the coop, in the coop, so we can effectively give them grain, and then the others we will move around the property. And so I love having chickens on the property. I love hearing the roosters crow. And I don't want to say just in the morning, because if you have chickens, you know it's not just in the morning. If you're going to have a full moon, you'll hear them in the middle of the night. You'll hear them throughout the entire day. But I love it. And I love the aspect of the eggs. I love the aspect of just having them on the property and that the kids can enjoy them, just the colors and the sounds and just everything about them. So I just want to thank you for listening to today's podcast, and we will see you next time on the Thrift Setting Podcast.